Hi, I'm ZKTour from ZKResearch, and I'm on site here at Palo Alto's Ignite conference. Now, most people think of Palo Alto as a firewall vendor, and rightfully so. They're the market leader in next generation firewalls, but in fact, they're much more than that. So I'm going to go into the expo hall and do another ZK tour. We'll have a walk around and take a look at what they're doing with machine learning and AI and cloud and a bunch of other cool advanced technologies. So follow me in, let's go in and have a look around. All right, here I am at the entrance to the expo hall, and we're going to go take a look at what they're doing in the areas of Prisma SASE, Prisma Cloud, Firewall, Cortex, and Unit 42. So let's head over to Prisma SASE and see what's going on there. So I'm here now at the Palo Alto SASE stand with Meena Sihar, who's a TME with Palo Alto, and you're showing off what you guys are doing in the area of SASE.
Yep.
Now, first of all, SASE is one of those interesting terms that a lot of vendors use in a lot of different ways. How do you guys define SASE?
So SASE is the umbrella solution that we have that comprises of three key verticals: Prisma SD-WAN, Prisma Access, and Autonomous Digital Experience Management. And SASE as a solution is used to provide consistent security posture for a hybrid workforce. So users could be coming in from their work, a branch office, or they could be working from home, or they could be working from a coffee shop. Irrespective of where they come from, the user's application traffic is we make sure that consistent security posture is applied to users, and we also continuously monitors users' application performance wherever they could be coming from.
So that's interesting, because most vendors will define it as the network access, the network piece, and then the security, but you actually put experience management there as well.
That's right, yeah. So experience management is an essential and key vertical, and it's one of the rising solutions that most vendors integrate as part of their security and SD-WAN solutions as well. And this is primarily important. I think this importance came in after the pandemic, because users are working in very diverse environments, and we need to make sure that users get consistent application experience wherever they are working from. So the Autonomous Digital Experience Management solution provides network admins and help desk teams with tools and techniques to resolve an application experience problem as quickly as possible. So the money that customers are paying for, not just for rich analytics and metrics, but also the time taken to troubleshoot a problem, bringing drastically down that MTTR to resolve a problem. So ADEM just does that. Within 30 seconds, a help desk team can quickly isolate where the problem is happening, and the help desk team can get down as granular as possible to a per user level, to a per application level, or they can also get enterprise-wide insights as to where the issue is primarily happening.
Yeah, and actually at Zoomtopia, you guys announced you'd be doing experience management.
That is correct,
yeah,
yes.
And I noticed they were here in the
That's
show
correct,
as well.
yeah. So the UCaaS integration that we have with ADEM, especially for Zoom, so we are able to pull performance telemetry directly from Zoom via API. So that provides an accurate assessment of how well Zoom is doing in an enterprise. So it provides a very accurate indicator of the success of Zoom deployment within an enterprise.
And so what are you showing here on screen?
Yeah. So right here, we are looking at a user dashboard. So this is a particular user, Jane Goodall, and this user has opened a help desk ticket. And ZS, if you are the help desk team, and I were to ask you, where is Jane's performance issue originating from? So there are a million answers to that question, right? But what if I told you within 30 seconds, you'll be able to isolate where the problem is happening for Jane just by looking at this user dashboard. So if you look at this dashboard here, the color legend green is healthy and good, amber is average performance, and red is poor. Just by looking at this service delivery chain, you can say that Jane's problem is originating from her local area network.
I thought we just always blame Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah, we sometimes do. But yeah, so good point you're bringing up here. So we provide rich Wi-Fi analytics as well. So right here, you can see we are able to capture the switchover in Wi-Fi SSIDs, and not just the SSID switchover, also access points. So we are able to provide insights into if a user connected to a different access point, we are also able to show that. And not just that, we are able to directly correlate the user's application experience to the particular segment that is impacting the performance. And that is where the value for a customer is.
Yeah, and so this is interesting. I used to, before I was an analyst, I was actually in corporate IT. I ran a help desk, and we heard all the jokes. No help desk, need help desk. And part of the reason was that, I'd estimate that about 3/4 of the trouble tickets were actually opened by the user, not the IT department. But in this case, IT would actually know about the problem maybe even before the user, or at least at the same time, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So using synthetic probes, we are able to proactively identify the problem. And Zias, so I'm going to give you one more information that's even better than this.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, the user does not even have to open a help desk ticket. So we have announced a new feature called self-serve, which means the end users will receive notifications of performance impacting incidents. So say, for example, the Wi-Fi is having a problem, and the user will automatically get a notification that says your Wi-Fi signal strength is bad, why don't you move closer to the access point or connect to a better access point. So this means drastic reduction in operational costs for enterprises because there is no help desk ticket.
Yeah, and so this is fine within corporate environments. Will this also extend to people's homes in a hybrid work environment?
Oh yes, so this is perfectly suitable for, this ADEM was born because of this particular situation that we are in, where users are coming in from different work environments, the hybrid workforce. So irrespective of whether the user is working from home or from a branch office or a coffee shop, we will be able to continuously monitor the user's application experience.
So no more can IT say, well, that's off the corporate network, it's not our problem.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
right.
And so what's coming next for the product?
We have several interesting products that are lined up. So we are looking at role-based access control. So if you look at this is the unified management portal. We have multiple personalities that are logging into this portal. So we do say that this is unified management, but it's not just one person who's going to be the administrator for the solution. So we have a SaaS security admin, a network administrator, an IT help desk team. So we have defined several role-based access control levels in order to make sure that each user who logs in only gets visibility into the portion that they need to get access to. And also we are going to have extensive API support for ADEM, which means that a lot of the telemetry, the good data that we collect here from ADEM can also be pulled by customers into their own dashboards.
It seems one of the benefits here too with this kind of rich dashboard is that no longer, well, not in all cases, but in many cases, the lower level help desk people could actually solve the problems without having to bring in those six-figure engineers.
Great point,
Yeah.
yes. So most often we see that level 1 help desk engineers often have to escalate to level 2, level 3, and there is a lack of historical data, and not all users in an enterprise are technically savvy. So if I were to go tell someone, okay, so what was your TXRX bandwidth at 3 o'clock yesterday?
Yeah.
So they're not going to have that insight, but right here with the ADEM portal, we're going to be able to reduce this back and forth communication and enable the help desk team greatly.
All right, well that's an important lesson for people. Like, there's lots of SASE solutions, but make sure that that experience management is part of it, because I suppose the thesis is that you can't manage what you can't see, and in a world of SASE, you can't see a lot of things in a lot of, right? With
That's
traditional
true.
network
Yep.
architecture. So, well, thanks very much. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
spending the time with me. I'm here now at the Firewall booth inside the expo hall, and I'm joined by Venki Krishan, who's a senior product manager for the Firewall product. Now,
right.
Firewall is the core product for Palo Alto, and it has been ever since the company was launched, right? The whole company, the idea was to build a better firewall, which is what you guys did. Now, it's a pretty mature market, so is there anything new going on with Firewall? Like, you've been around a long time, it's a mature market. What's happening now?
So from an attack standpoint, attacks are getting a lot more sophisticated. So in order to be able to go protect users, as far as the web traffic is concerned, there are a lot of capabilities that we've introduced in this release. As you can see, as we have some of the capabilities listed here. There is new capabilities around advanced wildfire, so where we end up leveraging the power of the cloud, where we do inline inspection. There's also AI, ML, and deep learning that we end up introducing. So all of these capabilities are available. We end up leveraging the firewall itself ends up talking to the cloud without any intervention needed from the end user standpoint, and without sacrificing any level of efficiency, but providing the same level of security.
Yes, the idea behind the original next-gen firewall was to roll up a bunch of features that were kind of independent at one time, and you've almost done that again, right? And so you could almost think this is a next-gen firewall,
Yes.
I suppose, yeah. Now, I know one of the new features you just announced was the web proxy, right? I think that was very recent here. And can you tell me about that and what that product does?
Sure. So for specific customers, what we realized is there are specific customers in regulated markets where they necessarily need to go ahead and use a proxy. So for those customers, if they want to go migrate away from their existing proxy, it presents a lot of challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is specifically around saying, hey, there's a fairly big change as far as your network migration or architectural changes are concerned. So in order to be able to ease the transition is why we've introduced web proxy capability more as an onboarding feature to help those customers out and become, and as they transition and become cloud friendly, cloud ready.
So yesterday in the analyst Q&A, Nir Zuk, your CTO and founder, was pretty strong on the point that proxies are dead and he's going to disrupt them. Do you look at this as part of the disruption of proxy, or a feature that maybe is here temporarily until another technology comes around?
We're essentially kind of, the other thing that Nir Zuk emphasized on is the fact that we're doing a consolidation play. And that is a kind of the theme that we're rolling ahead with. What the same box can end up doing is you can use it as a firewall, as a proxy, or maybe as a consolidation play where it can do firewall and proxy. And that's the pitch that we're moving ahead with. And this is focused on specific customers that are looking to move away from their proxy architecture.
Now, I know one of the things that some of your competitors say, especially the ones that are strictly proxy platforms in the cloud, they'll say you don't need any firewalls, right? And obviously, your firewall revenue is pretty strong. Or have you talked to any customers that have even considered getting rid of their firewalls?
I think that keeps coming up every now and then. We kind of have to look at it as what is the kind of traffic that's coming from the customer environment. It's web traffic. There is also non-web traffic. So if you're looking at the entire gamut of traffic that's coming out, you will still need a firewall. But as far as if you're looking, the tendency right now is focusing a lot more on web traffic because it constitutes about 75% of traffic. So for that, yes, and that's where all the features that we have launched right now ends up focusing a lot more on the web traffic. How do you end up protecting them?
Yeah, it's funny, people ask me all the time, do I see a day where everything is web-based? And my answer to that is maybe, but I'll long be retired, so it doesn't really matter. All right, thank you. It's good to see that there's still a lot of innovation going on with Firewall. I appreciate you spending the time with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, I find myself now at the Prisma Cloud station here, and I'm with David Akunwe, and you're a sales engineer or a solution architect now, I suppose, at Palo Alto. And so, when it comes to cloud and security, those terms are used a lot. There's a lot of security products called cloud. So can you help us understand what is Prisma Cloud and what falls under the scope of it?
Definitely. And so what Prisma Cloud is a cloud native application protection platform. So actually it's a term that was actually coined by Gartner for us. And really kind of a lot packed in terms of what we do for the cloud, not just for your running cloud environments, but also the entire development lifecycle for the cloud. So we're looking at your code, build, and deploy stage. What are all the risks that could potentially happen as you make your way into your cloud environment, and then how do we also protect that running cloud infrastructure?
All right, so it's security for cloud, deployed almost as infrastructure, or almost as code, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that we've really done well with Prisma Cloud is not only take a view from security engineers, but then how do we also enable developers as well too? How do we enable developers and DevOps teams to also use the platform to integrate and be able to embed security into their processes without slowing down their deployment processes? And
developers are a relatively new audience for Palo Alto, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so what was missing in the market that they weren't getting from their traditional tools that allowed you to jump in here?
Definitely, and I think kind of like the big thing in terms of security teams working with developers is usually if a developer or another infrastructure engineer deploys something, security will pick up the risk and then have to go back to the developer afterwards, kind of after the fact. One thing that we've really done a good job of in integrating our different products is actually being able to tell the developer ahead of time in that development lifecycle what is the issue, and then how can you provide that fix in like an automated fashion, so the developer now can go through their entire process and pipeline without slowing down their production speed.
All right, well, thanks for the overview, David. Now, what's new in Prisma Cloud that you might have announced here at Ignite?
Definitely. So a couple of things that we've released in terms of Ignite. We've integrated with our CIEM, or also known as CIEM, module, so that's Cloud Identity and Entitlement Management. We're actually now going to integrate with AWS Identity Center to kind of prioritize risk and pull in that data into Prisma Cloud. Another thing that we're also doing as well is API prioritization with our WAS module. So being able to see what are the risks with vulnerabilities, what are the risks in terms of your APIs in the environment, what exploits might exist. So you actually have more context now with those different vulnerabilities.
Okay, and what are you showing here?
Sure, and then this is just the Prisma Cloud console right here. So when you initially log in, you'll come to the Prisma Cloud homepage. We'll show you all of your urgent risks and incidents, any recommended workflows, and kind of what I mentioned earlier about the different stages. You have your code and build right here, deploy, and then also runtime. So being able to look at that entire developer lifecycle, and we actually make it easy for you to kind of get started, onboard your repositories, registries, and then finally those different cloud accounts. Another thing that we have as well too within Prisma Cloud is what we call Adoption Advisor. So often customers I work with want to know how are we doing in terms of our entire security, posture management, cloud workload protection, and also cloud code security. So we'll actually give you, different tasks that you can complete, as you're going through the onboarding phase. So you have your threat detection, your visibility, compliance, and governance, and then response, IAM, and data security. On the cloud workload protection side, your discovery and scanning, CI scanning, workload scanning, runtime defense, and then access control in the WAS. One thing I wanted to mention too about the cloud workload protection is we actually now have agentless capabilities for containers. So Prisma Cloud is actually one of the only tools where you can actually deploy either an agent directly for that runtime defense and vulnerability data, but also have agentless to grab the vulnerability and compliance data. So it's nice to have that flexibility based on those different environments.
And I'm assuming you use the agentless in the highly ephemeral containers, right? Where you don't have time to deploy an agent and...
Yes, that seems to happen a lot with customers I've been working with. Yeah. So if it's a little more ephemeral, or maybe it's an environment that you might not need the runtime protection. So I see customers kind of do a mix and match based on their needs. Yeah. And that's really what Prisma Cloud, kind of the goal is to give you that flexibility. You can plug in where you need to, for those different deployments. And on the cloud code security, this piece is where you'll actually onboard, and this is like the very developer kind of focused piece right here. So you have your inventory, your remediations, tagging notifications. Right now we support infrastructure as code scanning, so like things like your Terraform templates, CloudFormation, and Azure ARM templates, Bicep. We also do SCA scanning, so we actually can scan the code in your different environments to see your Java files, Python, Ruby, and more, just to see what those vulnerabilities are. And a new thing that we actually just announced is secret scanning. So we actually can scan for secrets in those different GitHub repos.
Okay, and without this, and I'm a former IT pro, so I had to live this. All the security would have to be done after the fact, and then and securing things in production is significantly more difficult than doing it at this stage, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think it's much easier to kind of go ahead of time and say, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the risks, misconfigurations. Yeah. I think the other key thing too is that it also kind of connects you with the developers. So teams that are, companies that are using Prisma Cloud, they're more in sync with what developers are doing, and vice versa. Developers can now see the different misconfigurations, vulnerability risks that's coming in. I think one major thing that happened last year was Log4j. When that came out last December, companies wanted to know quickly, where do we have Log4j throughout the environment? And that's something you can do with Prisma Cloud, with our Vulnerability Explorer. See where it exists across all of your different hosts, images, and functions. And we also have it embedded for code security as well too. So we actually can dive in and find those Java packages in your different GitHub repos, Bitbucket, GitLab, and more. All
right, David, well, thanks. That was great. That was a fantastic introduction into what Prisma Cloud is and what it's become.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your time.
So I'm here now at the Unit 42 stand. I'm here with Danny Milrad, who's the Director of Product Marketing for this group. Unit 42 is a cool sounding name. I always think of Area 51, but it's 9 less than that, I suppose. So what does this group do?
So let's answer the question of where 42 came from, if you want. So if you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
The 42 is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything.
And is that what this is?
And so this is it. So Unit 42 started about 9 years ago as our threat research team. We had a lot of firewall telemetry, a lot of information coming in, but customers didn't really know what to do with that, the telemetry, the indicators, and everything. So Unit 42 started as adding attribution and enrichment and understanding not just that there's attacks going on, but who's perpetrating their attacks, what their motivation is, what their TTPs are, what their, who are they? And we started putting out blogs and made it very academic and made sure that we could share that information, but also push it back through our products so that the products are getting better, stronger, faster as we learn more about these threat intel teams. That continued to snowball. We built relationships with law enforcement, with governments, and continued to share that information through the Cyber Threat Alliance. And then about 2 years ago, we acquired a company called Crypsis.
Yes.
Crypsis was phenomenal at incident response. They had a lot of ex-law enforcement, a lot of ex-FBI, and through just kind of customer requests that we were getting that they wanted us to help them with incident response. So we brought Crypsis in and started building out the new Unit 42. About a year and a half or so ago, the Threat Intel team and the Crypsis team came together to be that new Unit 42, knowing that incident response requires a special set of skills. And part of incident response is understanding who's attacking you, what's happening. So we created an embedded emissary program now that with every incident response case that we get called out to, we have a member of the threat research team that responds with them, so they can pull information in, feed it to the case leads so that they can identify who the attackers are, what their motivations are, and hopefully get a step ahead of them to knock it out and shut the attack down. But at the same time, those case leads are also now our primary research, where they're collecting those indicators and feeding it back to the threat intel and threat research team.
So it's the 1 + 1 = 3.
So it's 1 + 1 = 3. So that we can continue using that information. But as a security company, we, being in the incident response business, that's good. We want to help our customers, but we want to protect them and make sure that they're not getting hit, not getting attacked, or it's not as successful where they need to call us for incident response. So we spun up our cyber risk management business, which is taking very similar approach to embedding the threat intel and the latest research, but helping customers identify their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, testing out their systems before they get hit by an attack. So we do about 1,000 cases a year. There's some things that we see, some patterns we learn along the way, where about 1/3 of our cases are ransomware. About 1/3 of our cases are business email compromise. There's APT, there's an insider threat, a lot of different cases, but when you do that many cases, you see patterns. And we started seeing enough patterns where we said, you know what, we should be helping customers test against ransomware attacks, test against, testing, doing purple team, doing pen testing, tabletop exercises, ransomware readiness assessments, making sure that they understand how their teams can respond before the live fire incident. And so helping them, kind of evolve their security posture, if you will, based on the latest threats, based on the latest threat actors, based on all that information that we have from the threat research team and the incident response team, and providing those proactive services.
And does the data from Unit 42 then get also used by the larger Palo Alto for product development and helping them understand what to prioritize?
Yeah, so really good question. So the threat intel, the threat research, threat intelligence gets pushed back into the products. But we also, earlier this year, introduced a managed detection and response service. A couple of years ago, we introduced managed threat hunting. So now all of those incidents and cases and details that they're finding also get fed back into the Cortex team for XDR enhancements, get fed into Prisma. So we've become kind of a cycle of threat research, incident response, cyber risk management that is all enhancing all the other products and teams.
Yeah, it's funny because when I think of Palo Alto, historically, everybody knows you as a security company. But more and more, you're actually becoming a data company that applies the data knowledge you have to security, right? And it's an interesting transition for the company, but I believe almost every tech company is becoming a data company. So
yeah, no, it's a really interesting perspective. I mean, especially when you look at things like the Cortex data lake and
yes.
And Wildfire kind of started that concept, because Wildfire started about 10 years ago, where we were pushing all the files and sandboxing everything and building those indicators early on. But now with the data lakes and all the other areas that we're collecting, I guess you could say that. Yeah. And I think Nikesh said it in the keynote. That it's really about big data now, being able to do something meaningful with that information.
All right, Danny. Well, thanks for that intro into Unit 42.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm here at the Cortex stand with Jeff Lancaster, who's an SC with the group. Cortex, I find a fascinating product, or set of products. And when I think of Cortex, actually, I think of Data Lake first. It's interesting. I know it's XDR and some other products, but to me, the Data Lake is what creates the magic. So in your words, tell me what Cortex is and how should people think about it?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
As we can see here, Cortex is a holistic platform for SOC services. Data Lake is really what we've been building for a long time in terms of how we're processing data, both from the firewall and from our different acquisitions that we've made over the years. So Cortex as a whole has 3 products as of today that have been merged together to create a 4th that we've just launched. Those products are XDR, which is our endpoint detection and response tool, now merged into a true extended and detection response tool. XIM, or rather XSOAR, which is an automation and orchestration tool, and Expanse, which is an attack surface management tool. How Data Lake works in all of this is by serving as the backbone by which we ingest data into, perform correlation, and machine learning detections that from there can be sorted into incidents through XDR, enriched with information from Expanse, and then pumped all into XSOAR where we can automate the response actions taken as a part of that.
Yeah, and without the data lake being what it is, these other products really wouldn't work that well, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting because I was talking to somebody on the Cube about this, how we actually pulled people on Twitter as Palo Alto a good acquirer, and you got a little beat up for it. And I thought about that later. It's like a lot of the acquisitions you've done, though, have been about this, right?
Yeah.
You've been integrating the back end
Yeah.
with an eye towards the front end later. And I would argue you really shouldn't integrate the front end until you do the back end.
Yeah,
and that's what
absolutely.
you've got here. So now you did mention XDR, and I wrote my first XDR post in 2018, and I've noticed since then there's lots of vendors that use it in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah.
So what is XDR? Is it really kind of the evolution of EDR?
Yeah.
Is it the evolution of SIM?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
I mean, XDR started as a simple antivirus tool, right? It had signature protection as well as behavioral protection in the form of traps, but it's evolved much beyond that. So it is the evolution of EDR. XDR, as we have it now, includes components such as EDR, network traffic analysis from firewall integration, user and entity behavior and analytics, as well as indicators of compromise or behavioral indicators of compromise. So by feeding all of your different data sources into the Cortex data lake, we can process those, stitch those logs together to create a unified record in order to essentially streamline all of your investigations.
Yeah, when I've talked to customers about their experience with it, they've said it's taken the whole concept of antivirus and moved it away from being signature-based, which really was a losing battle, to being more machine learning-based. And so instead of the emphasis being on the people, the emphasis on the machines complemented by people.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
And I think as well, we're not just looking at the endpoints when we're talking about machine learning-based detections. We're also talking about cloud flow logs, network traffic logs. So when we start to talk about these anomalous detections, something we can surface, for example, on the network level would be repeated failed connections attempt for somebody to log into a machine. We can look at that from the network perspective, so the packets that are being sent, the app IDs that are being used. We can also look at, for example, the initiating process to see what user did that, what they're actually using in order to initiate these connections, and view the session status.
And what about XSOAR?
Yeah, so XSOAR would be essentially where you formalize your processes, either as a security operations team or from a more IT-heavy perspective, and really automate investigation and response in terms of incidents like you would get out of XDR. Now, XSOAR is not only a Palo Alto Networks product, it is completely vendor agnostic. We have integrations with almost 900 tools. And essentially, if you can dream it, you can build it in terms of your response actions. So a typical use case, one that we like to talk about, is something like phishing. You can pull the indicators from a phishing incident, whether it be the domain that it's coming from, the file that it's attempting to download onto a user's machine, and we can execute those in a sandbox, perform analysis of whether they're malicious or legitimate, and then automatically close out that investigation with minimal analyst oversight.
And what about Expanse? That's relatively new, right?
Yeah. So I actually came from Expanse. I'm a big Expanse fan. Expanse is an attack surface management company, and the philosophy there is for you to truly protect what you own, you first must really know what you own. And a lot of corporations, especially with the move to the cloud, with rogue IT, really struggle to identify what those assets are. So Expanse in the Cortex ecosystem really serves as a additional threat intelligence component where organizations are becoming aware of the issues they might have on the public-facing internet, initial attack vectors that attackers might use, and we can remediate those automatically using Cortex XSOAR.
Yeah, now the last product, you kind of hinted at it, I don't see it on the slide though, it's the, well, here it is, XSAM. And in fact, your CTO, Nir Zucki, in the analyst session yesterday, he talked a lot about Cortex really being about SOC disruption, and that being the next big area to be disrupted, of which the SIEM is one of them, right?
Yes.
And so what are you doing there? Where's that product now?
Yeah, and I think you brought it up earlier talking about data lake. Really the whole SIEM industry is built on manual correlations that have to be built, detections that have to be built out, and all that is really analyst based. So what we're trying to do with XIM is disrupt the SIEM by flipping everything on its head. We don't want analysts to be the fail point, the initial point, the point where everybody has to come in and build out these rules. We want to utilize what we're building in Cortex with the data lake, automatic correlations, automatic detections, and then use orchestration and automated components through XOR to actually respond to those alerts before an analyst.
Well, this is why when you think back the last 5-10 years, every big breach we've had, the SIEM vendor says we caught it. Well, if you caught it, why did it get missed, right? And because it's what you talked about, being so heavily manually driven.
Yeah. And I think, with all these different data sources, there's no doubt that the data in order to recreate a breach exists, right? It's just a matter of identifying it and proactively taking that action.
Well, that may be a good way to wrap up then.
Yeah.
So thanks for that overview on the Cortex. This of all the Palo Alto products, I know Firewall's your big revenue.
Yes.
but actually, I think this has a lot of the most potential to really change security operations. So. All right. Anyways, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
Well, this concludes the ZKTour, the Palo Alto Ignite Expo Hall. As you can see, I'm all swagged out here, so I'm going to go check out what's in these things. For you watching this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on another ZKTour.